11 bodies, 10 years, and countless theories. I'm talking about the Long Island serial killer case.
It was just how many bodies were being found in one area. I was shocked.
Follow us, Billy Jensen and Alexis Linkletter, on Unraveled, Long Island Serial Killer. And to follow our investigation even further, don't miss our all-new special Unraveled, the Long Island Serial Killer, streaming now, exclusively on Discovery+.
10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hychek.
And good evening and welcome to Untold Radio. I am the special guest host for the third week in a row, Michael O'Neill. With me, as always, on every show is Mr. Doug Hychek. Good evening, Doug. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Michael?
Frustrated, irritated, not with you or anything, just
life.
Trying to, well, I don't even want to say life, trying to, plan and organize two huge conventions at the same time. And we're starting to get into like flights for all of the talent coming in and dealing with all of the requests and I would like to have this and can you have that, when dealing with a whole bunch of money, it just makes you look longingly out the window and just think of how great it would be if you threw yourself through it.
Yep. I can only imagine. And with COVID, there's got to be, are there restrictions on people without vaccines and things like that?
Well, thankfully, here in Minnesota, it's getting better. Like they're continuing to open up a little bit. In fact, starting April 1st, and I'm assuming it's going to get better, May and then June. But now, like indoor events can have like up to 3,000 people, depending on what their normal capacity is, and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's starting to look better. And those aren't like, vaccine only, type of thing. I mean, you're going to have to wear a mask. I think that's just going to be in place until, at least the fall. Unless you unless you have your full vaccination, then I'm thinking that by July they would probably be, as long as you have that, you don't need to wear a mask.
Yeah.
But you probably should, just because, you never know.
Yeah.
Just to be on the safe side.
Well, you can make your own rules too. At your convention, if they don't require masks, if you want to, you could require masks. I would imagine at your own convention.
Yeah. Oh, sure. But chances are, for safety measures, like the only thing that I would probably go hog wild on is probably have enough hand sanitizer and stuff, and an ability for people to take a photo or whatever and then clean their hands, or shake hands with a celeb, or something like that, and then clean your hands, stuff like that. I think I would probably go hog wild on that, but otherwise I think the state pretty much has good guidelines. Like, I don't think anything more is really needed, beyond what they think is, but, I'm looking forward to it though. You're going to be there for both of them.
Yep.
In fact, you are now for Unity in Minnesota, Duluth, Minnesota, July 8th through the 10th. You are going to be a presenter now.
Yeah. Yes. Presenter. Whatever that means. I'm going to
that means you are going to put on a great presentation.
Yeah, I'll do something good. I won't let you down.
Well, because you did, I had to do an e-convention back in October, and you did a presentation there, and I thought it was phenomenal.
Good. Awesome. Oh, so last night I had the weirdest day. I got to tell you about it. So my old neighbor and I are working on a TV show, or we're talking about a TV show. So we did the art, and we came up with a name and whatever. And it's about neurosurgery and just kind of all the new medical breakthroughs, and it include families and the drama of just that surrounds getting ill, and getting cured.
Right. I mean, nothing screams entertainment more than watching people get sick.
It's like a crime show. Yeah. People seem to sometimes, I think it makes people feel better about their own problems. If they can watch how life can really get nasty on you, you might feel as bad about the situation you're in.
Well, that's why I think the paranormal is so popular, and why so many people watch, because they all like to see everybody else suffer, and they know that it's not them.
It's not them.
And
they're safe at home.
Right. And, they're not the ones that went through it. So, yeah, I mean, anyhow. But as long as there's a happy ending to it, which I hope your show does, I think it could be a good show. Yeah, no,
it will be if it gets picked up. But anyhow, so one of the things you have to do is you have to have a place to do a show. You've got to have a campus, a medical campus to produce it. And of course, we approached some people at the Mayo. You have to start at the very bottom. Approached some great people, one of the best brain surgeons in the world. And of course, he knows people. And so they did a Zoom meeting in the very early morning. And by 5 o'clock, I'm being invited to dinner. These guys are coming up to Blaine. And I end up having dinner with literally probably the top brain surgeon in the world, and one of the top medical engineers in the world. And and another medical engineer. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, this is going to be an interesting conversation, interesting dinner. I mean, this one guy, for instance, he built the machine at the Mayo that makes very pure diamonds that they can use for implant leads for deep brain stimulation. It's just not a machine. You just go, yeah, I'll just throw that together. This guy had the knowledge to do that. I mean, this is how high-end these people are. He has the knowledge to build all sorts of incredible machines they were showing me last night. One of them, the diamond machine, looked like a nuclear reactor, at the Mayo. And anyhow, we're in this great conversation, and I'm thinking, these guys are going to be in a hurry to go. You know what I mean? They're going to be booked out for months and months. It's going to be a quick dinner. And we end up there until quite late enough where I got in trouble a little bit. Getting back. Anyhow, but they were just awesome people, and I could have talked to them forever. I mean, there was no end to their knowledge. For instance, one of this surgeon, I mean, he's made paralyzed people walk with deep brain stimulation. And this is technology that's getting developed. And they've done implants that have allowed people who couldn't play like a musical instrument anymore. They could play the violin. And they're showing me videos of this guy playing the violin while he's getting brain surgery. It's just crazy stuff right out of, it's sci-fi. Anyhow, so that was my weird day yesterday. It was bizarre.
So one of the guys in the video that you watched was playing the violin.
Yes.
While they were tinkering with his brain.
While they were, I'm sure they had his, the top of his skull removed. Yeah. Yeah. See, the brain doesn't have any nerves in it. That it's a different type of it cannot feel pain, apparently.
Really? So if I got shot in the head, it wouldn't hurt?
There's been numerous cases of people that have walked around for years with bullets in their brain that did not know they were shot.
Now, I would know that I was shot, I would hope. I have heard stories about bullets like being lodged in the brain or whatever, and they don't want to go in and get it because they don't want to mess with the skull and the brain and stuff. And yeah, people just have their.
But there's been cases, Mike, where they didn't even know they were shot, like with a small caliber 22, and they were on a construction site was one case. And the guy felt a little sting in the back of his head, but that was the end of it. He felt a little blood. Oh, I got hit with a rock. Years later, he gets an X-ray, and there's a bullet lodged in his brain. So
I guess thank goodness it was an X-ray, not an MRI.
Yes.
I think they would hurt a lot more coming back out.
Well, the bullets are lead. They're not magnetic, I don't believe. But anyhow,
sure.
I got a really interesting letter today from Eric Schneider. He's a listener. We'll just call him a listener. And they've been listening to Untold Radio. But he sent me a link that I found very coincidental because yesterday I was on the phone with Dr. Lynn Rogers, and I said, I want to put a camera on a wild black bear, at least for a number, like 3 days, then recover it. You'd have to put a small camera with a battery and a big, huge memory card. And then you have to put some type of a collar that can dissolve, like get wet and dissolve in the rain. It drops off, you recover it. You download your footage, and then you go, oh, we didn't know bears did that. So I was talking to him yesterday about that, but he sent me this link to video where they did it with a wolf. And what do you think they learned? Take a guess. What would they learn about a wolf in 2021 that we didn't already know? What do you think? Come on, you can guess.
I don't know. They're pretty much like the Kama Sutra.
No.
Oh.
No. That this wolf kept going to the river and catching fish, and he was, instead of eating, deer and this and that, it was fishing. And so they had filmed it catching 3 different fish at 3 different days. And
maybe wolves can't like sushi.
No, but nobody knew that wolves would do that. They didn't know that wolves went fishing.
Gotcha.
Everybody thinks the wolves is pursuing, big game, deer mainly, moose, deer, that type of thing. And I thought, dang. So I'm watching the video and I'm like, how did they do it? Because I want to do it with a bear, right?
Those are the exact thoughts I have with the Kama Sutra.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Yes, no, it's fine. So I go and I find out where they got the camera system, and it's made in Germany by a space company in Germany, the camera system they used. And I'm thinking, I bet you that costs big bucks, right? But it only recorded 30 seconds every hour. I want to record the entire time, because what they didn't catch is the wolf actually doing the fishing. They would film him going to the river, wading in the water, and then you would all of a sudden it would cut to a fish, because it would only record a 30-second little clips. There's the fish. But it would have been really interesting to see what methods, they used. Do they leap on them, or what? What do they? I don't know. I want to get a camera system on, even on a wolf, but I want it on there all where it's running for 3 days solid, and you get to see everything. So that's my goal this summer.
How, I understand how you would get the camera. I mean, obviously you would find a pack, you would, use a tranquilizer or whatever, and then do it when they're asleep. How would you wrap, especially like a biodegradable, or one that would dissolve the way you want? How would you get it to strap it on so tight that it would stay there? Like, I would think with the vibrations of it running, that it would all of a sudden it'd be at the side, and then it'd be looking at his balls for 48 hours.
Yep. That's 2 strikes you got. No, I'm just joking. Anyhow,
Well, I got one more to go.
one more to go. I'm just joking. Okay. So what they do on all animal collars is you bolt them on. You use nuts and bolts and a socket. Because when you don't bolt it to their skin, you pull the collar quite thick leather. And apparently leather is pretty grippy in it. And you pull it tight enough to where you can, connect it where it's not, let's put it this way. You cannot use elastic. It has to be a solid, non-stretch material. And then that gets connected with rivets or bolts. In our case, we've always used bolts.
Say it would have to almost be like a harness.
Yeah, it looks like anybody can look up a radio collar for a bear and they can see it. They're kind of bulky and, they're not good. But what I want to do is build one out of paper or basically cardboard. And then, very stiff cardboard, probably coated, so it's somewhat moisture resistant, but it's probably not going to last more than a week, and it's going to drop off. So you make it semi-waterproof, and, whatever it drops off, and then you find it with a Yagi antenna or a GPS.
Right.
Yep.
I would hope that you would put a GPS on it.
Yeah, of course, yeah. You'd never find it.
Nope.
So that I found interesting. It was just odd because we were talking about it yesterday, and then today I get a link, and I'm hoping I'm going to call the company and just see what they cost. But I'm not a big fan of 30-second increments. It's very revealing. But okay, picture you or me with a camera that only caught 30 seconds of our life every hour. That would be pretty weird, wouldn't it? It would be hard to know what we were doing.
It gives me, 59 minutes and 30 seconds of anonymity.
Yes.
To do whatever I wanted.
Yes.
So I'd just be like, you can't blame me for this. You don't have it on camera.
Exactly.
So I just have to make sure that for that 30 seconds, I'm doing nothing risque.
Right.
So to speak. Or illegal, for that matter.
Okay.
How much do you think it's going to cost?
Well,
I would assume that something like this is not cheap.
I want to figure out a way where researchers can do these for $50 versus $20,000, which is what I'm expecting that camera system cost. I'm just guessing. Maybe it's.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, you're definitely going to need a cardboard harness if you want to do it for $50.
I'm thinking lower res, 3.6 millimeter lens, only recording in 480, right? Low res.
Really?
Because it's the content. It's not, you're not doing this footage for beauty. You're doing the footage to learn about what they're eating and, and what they're doing with their time. You don't need high res footage. Where this footage looked like it was probably, at least high def. And then, of course, you're using more memory and you can't record much. But I want to come up with something that's really affordable that researchers can, spend $50 on and put it on different animals, including coyotes and, God, what other animals? Rabbits? I mean, there's things to learn from any animal.
I would think that you would have a hard time doing any sort of animal that would go like underground.
Yeah, but wolves do. They dig dens, and bears do in the wintertime. But yeah, it could be a problem. Who knows? The idea is to make it really small, lightweight, make it last 3 days. That's all it's going to last. Drop off, recover it. And I looked at their cameras, and they have one that's got cotton as a link. And I always thought I was putting cardboard as a link. And I was surprised to think, I went, oh, great minds think alike. Because they're using cotton, which would degrade in nature pretty quick, too. You get lost. If you get lost in the woods, Michael, and you're wearing jeans, and you're out there for 2 weeks, you're coming back damn near naked. Because those jeans are going to disintegrate on you.
Yeah, nobody would want to find me at that point.
No.
If that were the case, if I no longer had my jeans.
Anyhow.
But I was going to say that I don't think, because you didn't think of the cotton thing until after you had read it. So you can't claim great minds think alike because you didn't come up with that idea.
I created the cardboard.
The cardboard, but they were talking about cotton.
They're using cotton.
If you knitted a wolf a sweater and then put it at that, I think that would work.
Yeah. A vest.
A vest, sure.
Vest. Yeah.
Could you imagine a wolf with an ugly Christmas sweater and a camera on that? I think that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'd watch that.
Yeah. You know, the other thing I found was really weird. I went to the YouTube link, looked at it, and I thought, man, this is going to have hundreds of thousands of views on it. 750 views or whatever. And I went, oh my God, that's sad. That's all the people that looked at this. Is historic. 750 people looked at it.
How many did you think it was going to have?
Oh my God, I figured at least 100,000 at minimum.
To watch a wolf catch fish?
No. To watch the world's first camera on a wild wolf. To see the footage.
Maybe they didn't do very good marketing.
Yeah, well, there was an article. I mean, I did see an article in the Star and Tribune. But anyhow, I want to do a call out. It was called the Voyager Wolf Project. And so if you go to www.voyagerwolfproject.org, you can see the video, can see how they did it, and then you can even click to the YouTube video, and let's start getting some downloads. Views.
You don't download YouTube videos, you just watch it.
Use all the new lingo views. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you should post it on the Untold Radio Facebook page.
Yeah, I should.
And then how long is the video? Because that's another big thing. If it's like 25 minutes long, you're not going to keep a lot of people.
No, it's like maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes.
That's not bad.
Gotcha. Shorter. Do you want me to click it?
No. Because then you're going to get distracted, and I'm going to have to sit here and try to talk to you being distracted for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
And believe me when I say you don't want that. Yeah. Our listeners don't want that.
Yeah. So we've got Kathleen Marden on tonight.
Yep.
And I've seen Kathleen on so many TV shows and documentaries and her books, but Kathleen is Betty and Barney Hill. She is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. And Betty and Barney Hill, for people that obviously know about it, probably know all about the case, but it was the first publicized abduction case. It was publicized, I think it happened in 1961, was kept secret up until that time. And then Kathleen can tell the story, but it got leaked out. They didn't want it to be leaked out. And then, of course, the world went crazy. It was quite a kind of a big deal. But she is just a wealth of knowledge on UFOs and abductions and history and everything. And I'm just really excited to meet her.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. She's also really very, very much active in MUFON.
Yep.
Author of what'd you say, 6 books?
5
books?
5 books. Yeah, maybe more. I don't know. I'm not good with that stuff. But yeah, she certainly has many books that she's written. Her latest is called Captured.
Yeah, which she did with nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman.
Yes.
So Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. So I'm definitely looking forward to not only hearing more about that story from like an inside perspective, because I think as somebody in the paranormal, such as myself, it always bleeds over to cryptid and extraterrestrial. So one of the first things you hear when you talk about abductions is Barney and Betty Hill.
Yeah.
And about their story. And, but I think there's probably a lot of stuff that happened surrounding it that not a lot of people know. or is not part of like the general story surrounding it.
I heard a fact today that I'm going to ask her about, of something that happened to Barney that I had never heard. And I've been aware of that case and studied it for many years, but there's that one detail, and that detail is haunting. And I want to...
Haunting to who, him or you?
It's haunting when you hear it.
Okay.
It really is. It's quite weird.
Okay. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to asking her, because I've got a very specific question about that. And not only is it haunting, it left a piece of evidence behind, physical evidence, which is when it gets really interesting, because this case was not without evidence. You know, there was numerous things that she'll tell us about where, I guess, things that backed up their story.
Well, I mean, they were even put under hypnosis and got their stuff all done. There is something that I'm definitely going to ask her about, and I'm sure like maybe even you could probably answer it, but I would rather have her do it. Is I have never, ever heard the name Zeta Reticuli.
It's called Zeta
Reticuli.
Zeta Reticuli.
Oh, Zeta Reticuli. Wow, is that a horrible spelling? Okay.
Yep.
The Zeta Reticuli system.
And what's so interesting about that particular system is basically it's a solar system. That's one of our nearest
from the system name.
Yeah, it's one of our nearest, and it's one of the. Would make sense if you were an alien, and to come from that solar system. It would make total sense.
It would make sense if you were an alien.
Well, if you're going to the local gas station, you're not going to go to the farthest one. You're going to go to the one that's the closest. And for
so you think that they're coming here not because they find us at all interesting, but because we're closest.
Could have been a gas stop, for all we know. We don't.
Extraterrestrial laziness. That's what I like. That's why we've been visited.
Oh my God.
They're like, I don't want to go to Alpha Centauri.
No.
I want to go to the Milky Way.
Well, you don't want to run out of gas.
Okay. I would think that if they can travel to different solar systems, chances are they're probably not using gas. They're probably using I don't want to say recyclable, but like a replenishable fuel.
What about food?
You think replicators can be a thing?
Food replicators?
Yeah.
Okay. But if you're making something, you still have to have ingredients. Maybe they ran out of ingredients.
Do you never watch Star Trek?
No.
Oh, no wonder you don't
really.
Understand.
Watch
The Next Generation.
So they just replicate ingredients? They make them out of nothing?
Yeah, so to speak.
Well,
yeah.
What do they take space dust and turn it into mashed potatoes?
Well, it's not that much of a far stretch if you consider that everything in the universe ever is energy, is made out of energy.
Right.
So why wouldn't you be able to take energy from one area and then kind of
Well, yeah, that's called growing. Yeah, you grow stuff.
No, but like instantaneously.
Oh.
Like boom, you convert it.
Yeah,
you transfer.
You skip all the
energy from one thing into energy of another, and
you skip this.
You could even take. It's what?
You skip the steps. You take sunlight, for instance, and you just bam, milk.
I don't think you take like sunlight, but you could take like the humidity that the sun creates in the air, maybe the water particles and stuff like that.
The sun doesn't create water, does it?
Well, it heats up the atmosphere to create...
Well, yeah, here it does. Yeah, and on a planet it creates humidity, of course. But there's not...
Say on a ship, it can do that too.
No, the point was...
Maybe not humidity, but...
Is the star system was basically mapped out by Betty, drawn by Betty, that she claimed one of her abductors had literally drawn this or shown her this star map, and she remembered it and drew it. And this star system was discovered by Marjorie Fish, who, through a lot of research, discovered it. Then it was confirmed, and then, then it gets like really confirmed, and then they figure out that, man, these are probably Goldilocks planets, and, in that system, and that would make sense. It's a lot of coincidences. Let's put it that way.
Goldilocks system or planet.
Yeah.
Never heard that term either. So go us. But all right.
We are
at the bottom of the hour, which means we are going to commercial, and then we're going to come back with Kathleen, and she's going to answer all of the questions that we just confused everybody with. So, go us. All right. We will be back here in just a couple minutes with Kathleen. Hang on out. You're listening to the Untold Radio here on the Iron Range Radio Network.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at Motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. Set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey, girl. School zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on 2 things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Untold Radio. I am the special guest co-host, Mr. Michael O'Neill. With me, as always, is my wonderful friend, Mr. Doug Hychek. Still doing well, Doug?
Yeah.
Good.
That break
and
went by instantly.
Say what?
The break. It went by instantly.
Well, that always happens. Time flies when you're having fun. And who doesn't have fun? Listen to commercials.
I wasn't listening to the commercials.
I know. But so we got our phenomenal guest here tonight. Her name is Kathleen. I knew this was going to happen. Marden.
Yep.
Sorry. I knew it was going to happen. Because I have like 3 different versions in my head and I'm tired. But obviously, as we said earlier in the show, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, who was pretty much one of the first publicized alien abductee cases, and now very, very active and an integral part of MUFON. And I know we definitely want to get to that stuff, because I got a lot of questions about MUFON and just like extraterrestrials and UFOs in general. But first, welcome, and thank you for coming on. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and thanks for having me. Great to be with you this evening.
Especially since it's a great like relaxing time away from the struggles of the day.
Yes, absolutely. Away from the physical labor.
So, starting with, the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. I think a lot of people have heard the names, and like they kind of got a brief, especially if they're in the paranormal, like myself and Doug. They know like a general idea of what happened and why they would know those names. Mm-hmm. But, as somebody who was an integral part of the family and, had kind of like the inside track on the behind the scenes, so to speak, I'm very, very interested to hear the story from your perspective.
Well, Betty's and Barney's case was the first scientifically investigated case of alien abduction in the United States. And most people were not aware of any other abductions prior to that. I was 13 when it happened on September 19th and into the early mornings of September 20th, 1961. And I heard about it that afternoon when Betty called my mother. My mother was her sister, 10 years younger. And Betty was quite concerned because the craft had come so close to her as she was sitting in the car, only 200 feet overhead, and closer to Barney, only 100 feet overhead and about 50 feet in the distance, while he was standing in a field, that she feared that they might have been contaminated, that or maybe they were exposed to radiation. And we had a neighbor who was a physicist, and so my mother said she would call him for his suggestions. And so she did, and for some reason he suggested not about radiation testing. He suggested that Betty take a compass out to the trunk of the car, or the car itself. She found shiny spots on the trunk of the car. But that a compass is going to measure a magnetic field. So that physicist knew something about UFOs that none of the rest of us knew. So Betty did go out, and that's when she saw new shiny spots on the trunk of the vehicle that hadn't been there the day before. And we went down, my parents and my 2 brothers and I, within a couple of days, and saw them for ourselves. And Betty told us what had happened. And what had happened is that she and my Uncle Barney had gone on a vacation to Niagara Falls, and then they spent the night in Canada, and they spent another night 112 miles west of Montreal. And as they were driving to the outskirts of the city to look for a motel that would accept their dog Delcy, Barney became lost, and the signs were all in French, and he found himself on the highway that went back to New Hampshire. They lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on the seacoast. So they had a great day being tourists, and on the way through northern New Hampshire, they stopped and had a cup of coffee, had a little bit to eat, and then headed south. And they left that restaurant at 10:10 in the evening. And when they were about an hour south of there, Betty saw a new light in the sky. And it didn't move like a meteorite. It moved upward in an arcing kind of way. And so it was a light, bright night. This sparked her curiosity. She was wondering what it is. And she continued to watch it as it came in closer and closer. They stopped the car and got out and looked at it one time and got back in. Barney was a skeptic. He did not believe that extraterrestrial travel was even possible. And so he kept saying to Betty, don't be ridiculous. It's some kind of conventional craft, and Piper Cub or a commercial airliner. And as this light and this vehicle came in closer and closer, and they entered Franconia Notch, which is a beautiful tourist section of the White Mountains. There are mountains on both sides of the road with a little stream that runs down on one side. There is a lake that is very pretty, and that's where the Old Man of the Mountain was. The Old Man of the Mountain's profile was 48 feet from the top of the head to its chin. And this was a rock formation, a natural rock formation. It's not there anymore. It fell off the mountain in 2003. But this craft came around the mountain and it stopped beside the old man's profile. And it appeared to be rotating. Betty and Barney could see that it was lighted on only one side. And it appeared to be at least 1.5 to 2 times the length of the old man's profile. So, probably around 80 to 98 feet. Or 96 feet. And so they were curious about this and continued to watch it as they drove through the Franconia Notch. They exited at the south entrance, and they entered North Lincoln, New Hampshire. This is an area of New Hampshire where the cabins were and the motels, and also tourist attractions in those days. But they were there during the off season, so there wasn't much traffic around. And as they were driving south, Betty said to Barney, "It's coming in closer. You have to look at this, Barney. Pull over to the side of the road." And as he was looking for a place to pull over, this craft surged ahead and descended to within 200 feet of their vehicle, right over the road. Barney would have had to have driven underneath it if he stayed in the lane that he was driving in. He pulled the car to the center of the road and stopped. And they looked up at this, what Barney called a silent, giant pancake. And they could see a lower row of lights around the forward edge. He got out of the car, left the car running and the door open. He stepped away from the car, and when he did, the craft shifted to an adjacent field and descended even lower to within 100 feet of him and not too far away. He held the binoculars up to his eyes, and he saw figures who were looking back at him behind the windows. There were several of them, and they were dressed in black, shiny uniforms. And suddenly, all except for one turned and walked to what appeared to be a panel. Their arms went up, and he could now see them from the tops of their heads down to their knees. And when their arms went up, little red lights started to slide out from the craft, and something started to drop down from the bottom of the craft. And Barney thought of a rope, but that was not a rope. We know today that that is like a carrier beam, and the non-human entities come down that carrier beam, and they grab the human, and all of them go back up into that beam and into the craft. Well, Barney became terrified at this point because he thought that there was a plan for him, and that plan was to capture him like, quote, a bug in a net, close quote. So he went running back to the car. He pulled the binoculars away from his eyes so forcefully that he ended up breaking the binocular strap. And he told Betty that they had to get out of there or they were going to be captured. He had left the car running. He went speeding down Route 3 in New Hampshire, trying to get away from this craft that he saw coming toward the car again as he was entering the car. He said to Betty, "Roll down the window and look up and see if you can see that craft. I think it's above us." She did, but she didn't see the lights. All she saw was blackness, even though it was a bright light night. Then, suddenly, she and Barney heard code-like buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the car that caused the car to vibrate. It was a 1957 Chevy Bel Air. And a tingling sensation passed through their bodies. The next thing they knew, as if only a moment had passed, they were 35 miles down the highway. They remembered finding themselves on a dirt road with tall trees all around. They remembered a roadblock somewhere, but they didn't know where or when that was. And they remembered a huge fiery orb sitting on the ground. And they heard a second series of buzzing sounds, and Betty turned to Barney and said, "Barney, now do you believe in flying saucers?" And he said, "Oh, Betty, don't be ridiculous. I can prove I can make that sound." He stopped the car. He drove from one side of the road to the other. He did everything to try to produce that sound, and he could not. So they just drove on home to their house on the seacoast of New Hampshire in Portsmouth. And when they arrived, it was later than they had anticipated it would be. They thought they'd arrived between 2 and 3 in the morning. They had driven that route before, but it was 5:15. And there was evidence that something unusual had happened. So, what was unusual? There were shiny spots on the trunk of the car that hadn't been there the day before. I've already told you about that. Betty's dress was torn in several places. It had been in fine condition when she put it on in the morning, and when she took it off the following morning, the lining was torn from waist to hemline. The hem was torn down on one side, and the zipper that ran up the back of her dress was damaged. There was a 1-inch tear in the thick zipper fabric, and there was a 2-inch tear in the stitching along the zipper. And Barney's shoes were so deeply scraped that he had to buy new shoes. The watches they had been wearing that night that they had set at about 10:10 that evening had stopped running. They set them to the time that it was, 5:15. I still have Betty's watch. But those watches never ran again, probably due to that powerful magnetic field. They were wind-up watches.
Well, just to get a little bit into the weeds, has anybody, a watchmaker, taken the watch apart to determine what in the world happened with a spring wine watch and the fact that they both quit working? I mean, that's, I could understand, I guess, the Timex going bad, Kathleen, but a wind-up?
Right. I don't know. I don't think that anyone had ever taken the watches apart to attempt to determine what went wrong.
That would have been the first thing I would have done if I would have been, had access to them. But so they remembered seeing the object, the thing on the ground. They had memories, and they came back late, but they didn't remember the abduction, correct?
That's correct. Barney remembered observing the entities on board the craft.
Right.
That was in the first letter that they wrote after they arrived home. On September 26th is when they wrote that letter. But yes, they did not remember the abduction itself.
And then how long had gone by, and do they remember, or do you remember, because I know you guys were close, did their behavior change at all, from the time of that trip to the time they eventually did get some help to try to remember what happened?
Absolutely. Their behavior changed. When Betty and Barney arrived home, Barney said to Betty, "Don't ever tell anyone about what happened to us. No good could ever come of it." And Betty did not agree with him, and she went to the phone and called my mother. And then she went to the Portsmouth Public Library a couple of days later and took out a book and read that. It was the first book she'd ever read on UFOs. My father's friend had been the chief of police in the little town of Newton, New Hampshire, next to the town that I grew up in, and he told Betty and Barney to call Pease Air Force Base and file a report. So they did. But Betty was very curious. Barney just wanted to forget about it. He was the one who left the car and who saw those non-humans through binoculars. He was the one who was so terrified that they were going to be captured. And so Betty didn't have that fear. She was a passenger in the car. She hadn't gone into the field with him. And so she had a series of dreams about 10 days later, and they contained information that she consciously recalled. They happened in the early morning, just before she awakened for the day. But in those dreams, sandwiched in there was a dream of encountering men in the road. They looked pretty human. In her dreams, not went under hypnosis, but in her dreams they had black hair, human features. Their eyes were a little bit slanted. They were wearing blue cadets uniforms. That's not what they remembered under hypnosis. So she was just extraordinarily curious. She wanted to know more. She wanted to learn all that she could, and she wanted to determine what happened to them. Barney, on the other hand, started to have problems. He had difficulty sleeping. He finally developed bleeding ulcers and spent time in the hospital because traditional medical treatment could not heal his condition. He had high blood pressure. Barney was really beginning to come apart because of this experience, and because Betty would not stop speaking about it. She would not stop investigating it. And
well, I'm curious. What did your parents, how did they react? I mean, it was her sister, correct? Your mother?
Yes.
So how did they, did they talk behind her back? Did they believe her? Did they believe Barney?
Yes, they absolutely did. Betty and Barney were very credible people. She was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. He worked for the post office. They were both actively involved in the civil rights movement. And, so they were the kind of people that people looked up to, that I looked up to as a child. And of course they believed them. My father was the person who recommended to Barney that he might want to see a hypnotist to try to recall more about the faces of those entities that he saw standing on the craft.
Wow. So your parents were supportive. That's cool. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes.
Oh, I was just going to say that because the question that I've been wanting to ask is they all knew kind of that they had encountered this craft and that everything that was kind of going on with the health and everything was associated with that. But what was there ever a point, or was there ever some sort of incident that happened where they thought to themselves, something more happened to us? Or was the hypnotist suggestion specifically just to deal with, their encounter with the craft itself? And if so, what were their reactions when they did go under hypnosis and there was like this whole other side to the story?
Well, they had the perplexing evidence. You don't dream evidence. And Betty's took her dress out of the closet, and it was covered with pink powder now. So that was more to think about. And they had gone out looking for that road in the fall of 1961 and then in the spring again. And they could not find that road. But one of the times that they had been up there, they returned home and entered their house, and there were leaves on the dining room table, withered leaves that they hadn't put there. They picked the leaves up, and the earrings that Betty had been wearing on the night of the abduction were in those leaves. So there were so many things that were perplexing. And when Barney was referred to Dr. Simon because of the illness, he had been a colonel in the Army during World War II. And he had set up the psychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island. And he was very successful in treating men who were coming back from the war with wounds, physical ailments that were psychogenically induced by the trauma of the war. And he had developed a special technique where he could get at all of the reasons, not just one reason. A man's best friend was killed in front of him in the war, but what else triggered that blindness? Because the blindness remained even after the hypnosis initially. So Dr. Simon really got to the crux of the matter and had a wonderful reputation, outstanding, for developing that technique. So Betty and Barney saw him for the first time in December of 1963. And he was anticipating that he was going to treat Barney. But Betty went along and she asked for hypnosis too. So he decided that he would take her on as a patient as well. They began their conditioning for rapid induction in January of 1964, and the hypnosis sessions began in February. He hypnotized them separately, while the other one was waiting in a waiting room, soundproof with loud music playing. He did this for two reasons. One, so that they could not contaminate one another's information by sharing the story with one another, what they remembered. And the other, because at times the trauma they lived through was so great that if they remembered all of it at once, it could have created additional anxiety. So those were his techniques. And Betty and Barney started with Dr. Simon at the beginning of the trip, what they did, why Barney decided to go on this trip. The reason for that was when I was 13 years old, I went to Niagara Falls, and I was showing Betty and Barney the photographs I took and talking about what a wonderful time I had. And Barney said to Betty, "Have you ever been there?" And she said, "No." He said, "Do you think you'd like to go sometime?" And she did want to go, so she had a week's vacation from her job, and he surprised her with this trip. So that's what happened. They both relived going to Niagara Falls and on to Toronto and to Montreal, the entire trip, right up to the point where they saw the craft and everything they remembered until after the buzzing sounds were striking the trunk of the car and caused that tingling sensation to pass through their bodies. At that point, Barney did not want to go on. And Dr. Simon saw Betty and Barney for a period of 6 months. This is not just one session apiece with him. So they told precisely the same story based upon their personal perception of what they were seeing along the way, the scenery, what they had to eat that day, everything, to jog those memories, so that Dr. Simon could be certain that they had remembered what actually did occur. And then he took Barney up to that point where he had amnesia, and he did not want to go beyond that. He begged Dr. Simon to, "No, don't make me remember, Dr. Simon. Please, don't make me go on." And Dr. Simon did. He said, it's in the past. It will remain in the past. It can't hurt you now. And then Barney did go on. And if you've ever listened to the hypnosis tapes where Barney was kind of almost screaming on YouTube, that was the point. Yes.
Yeah. Was Dr. Simon affiliated with the government in any way?
I don't know if he was affiliated with the government when he saw Betty and Barney. I don't think he was. I know that he owned a private psychiatric hospital at one time. He taught at Harvard. He taught at Yale. And he was in private practice. And it was late in his life when he saw Betty and Barney.
One of the things that struck me when I listened to Barney's hypnosis session is he's extremely soft-spoken, very robotic sounding, until he gets into the terror that he obviously felt. Because if anybody has not listened to that and then can look someone in the eye and say, well, there's nothing to the abductions, to hear the terror in his voice, it's really it's unsettling.
It was. And it is. The first time that I listened to those tapes, and for the next few times, I wept for Barney as I was listening to that. It was terribly emotional.
It's graphic, yeah. It's once you listen to it, it's so powerful. It's hard to get out of your head.
Yes.
How old were you when you heard that tape, Kathy?
I heard the tape for the first time in the 1990s.
Oh, okay.
So I was an adult. I was 13 when it happened in 1961.
So was Barney a very soft-spoken, peaceful kind of person?
He was very soft-spoken. He was highly intelligent. His IQ was 140.
Wow.
And he was also a jovial person. The children in the family had a wonderful time with him. He played games with us and was interested in our schoolwork. And he and Betty took us out to dinner and to museums and things like that. So we had a great time with Barney. But boy, he was different when we went to their house after this incident occurred. And, as he sat quietly, and then as time went on, instead of coming to my childhood home as he always had, he would stop in briefly and he'd say, I'm going to go for a walk on the farm. I grew up across the street from my grandparents' farm in Kingston, New Hampshire. And he would go down back, and he had a flask with him. He was not a drinker, but this was causing so many emotional problems for him that he began to drink as well. And so it really was having an impact on him psychologically and emotionally.
How many sessions did he go through of hypnosis? You said it was quite a lot.
Yes. Well, I have 10 hypnosis tapes. So I think that I'm trying to remember if I think that one side was Barney and one side was Betty. So I think that Dr. Simon hypnotized each of them 10 times.
Have they all been released to the public?
Kathleen? No, those are, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have something that came up there that I want to get rid of. Okay, so please repeat that question again.
I can't remember what the question was, Kathleen.
Well, this red sign suddenly came up on my screen and I panicked.
No, that's fine. Okay, one was, have the tapes ever been released? All of them to the public? And the other question I've got is, is there a written record, a transcript? Did anybody find his personal files, his personal opinions, the notes that he would have made for himself? Have those ever been recovered?
No, because that is medical property, so it is protected by law. And right. Dr. Simon's son has that information now. Okay. Betty signed a release so that Dr. Simon's son could release the hypnosis tapes to her. And she gave me a copy of them back in the 1990s. And that's when I started to transcribe those tapes. And I was not a good typist in those days, so it took me a long time. But I did listen to them and transcribe them finally. And there is a copy of that transcription at the archival collection that I set up at the University of New Hampshire at the Milne Archives, Special Collections Library.
Yeah, well, wouldn't it be interesting, though, to see if you could have access to his personal notes on Betty?
I wouldn't do that because it's protected. Right. I respect people's privacy.
Okay.
And Betty, did not want those tapes released either. So Dr. Simon owns those, and I am the trustee of Betty's estate, so I also have a share of ownership in those because they were jointly owned. But right. we do not intend to release them to the public.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly what is available is very, very powerful, extremely.
Yes.
So can you elaborate, Kathleen, on some of the real kind of, the star map and some of the things, the medical tests that Betty remembered in hypnosis, and some of the things that really back up what happened to them? And that would be really cool to hear your take on all that.
Okay. Well, those non-human entities stopped the car, and Betty and Barney started talking. They said, what? Is there an accident ahead? They were just confused and perplexed. And then the entities started to walk through the car, toward the car. Their heads were larger in proportion to their bodies than than humans' heads. They had spindly arms and legs. They had kind of large barrel chests, slanted eyes that glistened in the dark, and tiny noses, no external ear, and just a slit for a mouth. Betty tried to escape. She couldn't. They intercepted her, but when they took her down the path and tried to take her onto the craft, she fought for her life. She didn't know if she would be taken to some distant planet or what was going to happen to her, even though they reassured her that she would be just fine, that they only needed to do a few simple tests. So she kicked the one beside her, and that's how her dress was torn, the lining and the hem. With Barney, they escorted him. He felt as if he was floating, and only the toes of his shoes were bumping along the rocks. And then they slid up the ramp onto the craft. They were taken to separate examining rooms, and these non-human entities were extraordinarily interested in their hands, their feet, their skeletal structure, their muscular structure, their nervous system, and also in their mouths. These entities didn't have teeth in their mouths, but so they were very interested in Betty's and Barney's teeth. They took many samples from their bodies, and then they placed Betty on a table. The examiner tried to unzip her dress and wasn't able to operate a zipper. That's how it was torn. So she had to help. The dress dropped to the floor, and he produced a large needle, had her lying on the table, and she said, "What are you going to do with that?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry. It's only a simple test. Think of it as a pregnancy test." And she said, "Don't do it. It will hurt." And he did it anyway. He plunged that needle into her navel, causing so much trauma for Betty, crying and tears running down her cheeks, that Dr. Simon had to end the session early. But before he did, the one that she called the leader, that we know today as the escort, did something around her head, and it took away all of her pain. So she began to trust him. That needle placed in her navel happened 10 years before amniocentesis was being used in a hospital setting. So that was pretty remarkable. There was no way that she would have known about that. And so for Barney, they took a sperm sample. They did everything else that they did to Betty, and they took a sperm sample from him. While he was being worked on, examined by the examiner, Betty struck up a conversation with the leader after she put her dress back on. And she saw a book, first of all. It wasn't really a book, but those were the only words that she had for it. It reminds me of more like a tablet. It had 6 vertical rows of symbols that she had never seen before. They seemed to be embedded in this page, and it had a very thin but hard, like plastic kind of cover. And so she said to the leader, "Can I take this as my evidence that this has happened?" And he said, "Yes, you can." So she was holding it, and then she said to him, "Well, I know you're not from around here. Where's your home port?" And so he produced a 3-dimensional star map. In her dream sequence, it pulled down like a window shade, but it was a 3-dimensional star map under hypnosis. And there were 2 large stars in the foreground, and there were 12 stars in all, connected by lines. And the 2 large stars that were about the size of a nickel or a quarter had 5 lines connecting them. And then there were other stars there were 3 that had 2 lines connecting them. And then another one with 3 lines. And then there were more stars that had dotted lines. And Betty was made to understand that the solid lines were trade routes and the dotted lines were expeditions. She said to the leader, where are you on this map? And he said to her, well, do you know where you are on the map? And she said, no, I don't. And he said, if you don't know where you are, how can I tell you where I am? Which I thought was a little bit deceptive. And so then he made the map go away, and Betty still had the book, and Barney's exam was about finished. There was a little conversation they had about Barney's dentures where they tried to tug on Betty's, and hers were not removable. And so they were ready to be escorted from the craft. And Betty refused to leave. She argued that the leader had given her this book to take with her as her evidence. And the leader explained that the crew had decided that she was not going to take that book with her. And so Barney was escorted to the car first, where he sat on a gun that he had on the seat. And he patted the dog. The dog was shivering and shaking on the floor in the front seat. And then Betty was escorted down the path by the leader. And as she was leaving with him, he apologized for frightening her so badly. This is all telepathic conversation he's having with her. And she says that, well, I was frightened, but do you think you can come back? Could you come back and see me again? Because if you can come back, I can arrange for you to speak with people who are more knowledgeable than I am. And he said, well, I don't know if I can come back. It's not my decision to make. Maybe I can. And Betty said, well, how would you find me? Out of all the millions of people on this planet, how would you find me? And he said, we can always find those that we want to find. So I think that probably Betty had an implant, and maybe this was not the first time that she had been taken, but it was indeed the first time that she remembered being taken.
Wow. I remember hearing the denture detail when I was just a young man. Mm-hmm. It was that one detail that made my light bulb go off. It made me believe that entire thing, because who is going to make up a detail like that? It's just so, you know what I mean? It's so.
I know.
And I remember, back in the 70s, I'm, 16-year-old kid, and I remember hearing that and going, oh, that definitely happened. That was an amazing detail.
Yes. Well, there was so much evidence, and that crazy story, I oftentimes don't even talk about the dentures for some reason.
But it's just such a little detail.
It is.
And it's so powerful because there is not a chance somebody confabulating some story, whether under hypnosis or in real life, they're not going to make up that little detail. It's not going to happen. Did Barney in his hypnosis experience any pain? Did he complain of pain? Did they jab him with needles? And
no, they did not. And in fact, Dr. Simon said to Barney, well, do you feel that you've been kidnapped? And Barney said, no, I don't feel that I've been kidnapped, because when I think of being kidnapped, I think of being harmed, but I wasn't harmed.
Interesting.
If neither one of them were really, like harmed, especially Barney, where did he feel like his terror came from? Like, why was he so, like, absolutely against remembering, that this had happened?
Well, what Dr. Simon, I believe, discovered was that not only was Barney traumatized by observing these non-human entities, but Barney was traumatized by growing up in the South in a segregated system. Often in the summer, he went to visit his aunt and uncle on their farm in rural Virginia, and he was always under threat from the white people. And, and Barney was highly intelligent. He wanted to go to college. He wanted to become an engineer, but that was not even a possibility for him, he was told, because of the color of his skin. And so it's, I think, a combination of that and of the experience of the craft hovering overhead and having that conscious memory of those non-humans looking down at him and feeling that he was going to be captured.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just if you could imagine seeing entities, being awake and seeing those through the windows, that would be alone extremely terrifying.
Yes. And, a lot of people are a little bit traumatized just by observing a UFO up close.
Yeah.
And, to actually see the non-humans and to feel threatened by them could really cause a problem for a person.
So, when you heard the conversation that Betty had with the alien telepathically, did that seem like Betty's personality? I mean, she seemed like she was outgoing, and she would have been very friendly and curious. I mean, it just seemed to fit. Am I correct there?
Yes, she was outgoing. She was highly intelligent too. She was curious, and she trusted the leader at that point because he took away her pain when she was feeling pain when the needle was inserted into her navel. And, that's why she began to have a discussion with him. So, yes, absolutely for Betty.
Yeah. And so the amniocentesis test, was that actually a pregnancy test that they performed on her? And wasn't that same test used to test for pregnancy just years later?
It was about 10 years later, and I doubt that they were testing Betty for pregnancy. I doubt that they were trying to remove amniotic fluid. She was 42 years old at the time. She had her her uterus removed. She'd had surgery at that time. I think that they were probably looking into her internal organs. Perhaps they removed ova too, but the navel is kind of high up. Yeah. The ova are down lower. So I really don't know for certain. I do know that that procedure has happened with some men. They have told me about that. And so perhaps it's only to look at the internal organs. I do not know for certain.
Wow. Have you ever heard of anybody else mentioning the buzzing and the clicking that Barney remembered so well?
Oh, absolutely.
That has come up, huh?
Yes, the buzzing sounds on the trunk of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah. What people remember is the tingling sensation, not necessarily the buzzing sounds on the trunk of the car that cause the shiny spots on the trunk, but a magnetic field around the trunk of a vehicle is common among people who have been abducted and their car was taken. So that has happened.
It's really, there's just so many details, in this case. Can you think of another case other than maybe the Travis Walton that has this much scientific details to it?
Well, maybe Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker.
Yeah, the Pascagoula, I believe.
Yes.
Incident.
And then Denise and Ed Stoner. That's a case that I wrote about in the Alien Abduction Files. Denise added her own thoughts on it as well. And Denise is almost a lifelong experiencer. And in 1982, she and her husband were driving to meet her parents at a summer place that they went to every weekend during the summer. They lived in Arvada, Colorado, near Denver. They were going through South Park Valley. They'd just come off a pass, and these two craft came in toward them and picked their car up, carried it across the desert. They lost 40 miles on their odometer, and they underwent the same kind of procedures that Betty and Barney underwent. So, it was very interesting to me because it was similar to what had happened to Betty and Barney. And there were people at the other end waiting for them, and they were 3 hours late in arriving.
Wow.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doug. Oh, well, okay.
I was just going to ask if there was any long-term, health effects, soon after the incident, and how did that affect Barney's health and Betty's health?
Their health was not too bad. Betty developed some pneumonia. Barney did a little too, but the worst impact, I believe, came when their story was taken to the public as the result of a violation of confidentiality. And when that happened, Barney had been appointed to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights as a representative from the state of New Hampshire. He had been given an award for his community work through the Office of Economic Opportunity, given that award by Sergeant Shriver and the governor of New Hampshire. And Betty and Barney had a lot to lose by having this story exposed to the public. And a writer for the Boston Herald, John Luttrell, published that story for 5 nights in a row. A friend of Betty's had spoken to him and told him everything that she knew about Betty and Barney. It was a violation, and Betty and Barney thought that they were going to lose their jobs. They were going to sue, but they couldn't. They didn't lose their jobs, but Barney wasn't reappointed to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission when his term was up. He was pretty active in politics and in the civil rights movement. We went to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration as invited guests. So that made a big difference and was terribly disappointing to Barney.
Yeah.
Were they ever going to release the story?
No.
If it wasn't, so we would never have heard of it. You
would never have heard about it unless I grew up and decided to write about it, I suppose. But it did have a huge emotional impact on Barney when the story was released. And then they did agree to allow John Fuller to write The Interrupted Journey. And we met it as a family and discussed that, because this not only impacted Betty and Barney, it affected the entire family as their relatives. And so we, as a group, decided that they should talk about it. They did speak for the first time in November of 1965, and what they said, it was at the Universalist Unitarian Church in Dover, New Hampshire, and they were introduced by the public information officer from Pease Air Force Base. And they talked about their sighting. They didn't talk about the abduction itself, only about the sighting. The church was packed with people, and John Fuller was in the audience and asked to write the book. He was in New Hampshire doing research for the incident at Exeter, the book that he wrote the same year as he wrote Interrupted Journey.
Do you think, and it's kind of like a specific question than a generalized question, but do you think that Betty and Barney were, forgive my terminology, targeted? Or do you believe wrong place, wrong time? And in general, when it comes to like abductions, especially nowadays, do you believe that they are more of a targeted nature, and in the non-human entities know exactly who they're going for? Or do you think it's just kind of a random pick?
Well, I have worked on 3 major studies with about 5,000 experiencers in all. And in those studies, which we had people with PhDs working on them as well, we discovered that this is definitely generational. It's intergenerational. And there appears to be a longitudinal genetic study, an attempt to upgrade the human genome, because those non-human entities tell these experiencers time and time again that they are concerned about our failure to be good stewards to our planet's environment. And also, they're extraordinarily concerned over our use of nuclear weapons. But not only does it have an impact on our Earth, but it also carries out through the dimensions and can impact other dimensions as well, they say. So I do think that they might have been searching for Betty. And if she had an implant, they had tracked that. I don't know that for certain. It's just speculation. But knowing all that I know after 30 years of working full-time as an investigator and researcher, and I had been the head of the director of MUFON's experiencer research team as well. I just gave that up due to time constraints, but I had trained 45 people to work with experiencers on a day-to-day basis, and we have 5 psychotherapists and psychiatrists who are advisors to the team. So, yeah, I think absolutely that there is a program. It's a medical program, and I think that it is an attempt at human survival, that our warlike behavior is viewed by them as being extraordinarily undesirable. They don't want us out in their space, considering our behavior here on this planet. Those UFOs show up at all of the wars, being spectators, and they seem to live under deep bodies of water. Their abduction or contact is prevalent around large bodies of water, the Great Lakes, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. Off the coast of Peru, there appears to be a base, and there are people in Peru who can communicate with the non-humans, who come up and they can see them through the windows of the craft. So, yes, I do believe that there definitely is a plan.
Do you think, Kathleen, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that there are more abductions going on today than there were 10 years ago?
I think that among the younger people, Not as much, but we're receiving more reports. The Mutual UFO Network's experiencer, it's called Resource Team now, receives about 100 reports a month. And that's quite a lot. But what we find is that many of those individuals are older now. And things are happening that they're receiving information. They're being healed from their ailments, their sicknesses, by these non-human entities. And it seems that a friendlier relationship is being established.
That's interesting. So do you think anything is going to come out of this little June burst of disclosure that we may or may not get?
Well, I'm not going to hold my breath because I know that the government is not going to release anything that is above top secret.
Yeah.
And probably not top secret either. Only secret and just classified below that. So maybe we'll get some new information, but...
It all helps. It does all help.
Yes.
For sure.
It does help.
I mean, I've noticed that the real major skeptics on UFOs are kind of keeping their mouth quiet now.
Yes, they have, particularly since the newspaper report on the front page of the New York Times on December 16, 2017, announcing the ATIP program and the secret classified program run out of the Pentagon, and then the Navy admitting that the radar evidence does belong to them. It is their film, and they don't know what those crafts are. So, and the scientists say that they can outfly and outmaneuver anything we have, even second generation technology from now. And any human that in a craft which was made by us, if it zigzagged around like that, would not survive. So there has to be some technological knowledge that these entities have to protect their bodies and the bodies of humans. And I do know that the humans are put into special places for travel on craft.
Do you think a good part of the government doesn't even know, what they are? Or do you think they know all the answers? Kind of what are your thoughts?
It depends upon how old they are, I suppose. Back in 1946, the government was studying this. Stanton Friedman and I wrote about it in our book, Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers, based on archival research at physical archives. And the CIA became very interested in 1952. And the largest study ever done by the U.S. government was carried out by the Air Force funding, and it was carried out at the prestigious Battelle Memorial Institute. 3,201 cases, and they tried to classify those into prosaic explanations such as aircraft or birds or balloons, psychological hoax, etc. And in the end, 21.5% could not be explained. So those older individuals and those who have access to those files and the interest in reading them would know that the government has been studying this for a very long time. And I have recently written an article and it's on my website, about new information that I had received from the granddaughter of Admiral Herbert Knowles. He was a rear admiral, and it was letters written between Herbert Knowles and Wilbert Smith. And Wilbert Smith was the Canadian government's UFO scientist. And they and the government and the CIA were working with a communicator, a person who was receiving telepathic messages from ETs, allegedly ETs, and writing all this information down. And people in the government learned how to do this as well. It was a fascinating study and fascinating information. So it's on my website at Kathleen-Marden.com.
So with, from what it seems like, the non-human entities are trying to, I guess, save us. They're trying to do right by us and get us on the right path. And I firmly believe that myself. Well, what is keeping them from, I guess, I don't want to say exposing themselves, but from making this like a public sort of thing? Because if there's one thing that, we as humans, fear the most, it's the unknown. So, wouldn't it help them more so if they just kind of announce what they are trying to do? And what is keeping them from doing that?
What they say is that they try to do their work quietly without disrupting human life on this planet too much. And they fear that two things might happen. One is that they would be seen by the military forces in various countries as invaders, and it would start a war, and their technology is superior. It would end up being an invasion because they would have to take out the militaries. Also, another reason is because, and this is what I think, they haven't said this, but whenever a technologically advanced society has gone into an indigenous society and remained there for any time, there's been a breakdown in cultural values and mores, and it's been very, very difficult for those societies. So these non-humans, I believe, are doing this for two reasons, but the one reason they talked about is the possibility of warfare against them.
What about the people, or I shouldn't say the people, but what about, a lot of the theories of that, especially our government and non-human entities are actually working together?
Well, in 1954, I'm going back again to the communication with these non-humans. They said that they wanted to meet with the heads of state in all of the governments around the world at that time. And these were the human-looking ones, not the grays. And what happened is that no government wanted to meet with them. But they said that they would share technology with every country, with every government around the world, and no one would be favored over another. That's what they said back then. And so Wilbur Smith and Admiral Knowles were saying, be cautious of those who state that they have a special relationship and have received technology, whereas other countries have not. So it makes me question this. I do believe that we have crashed craft, and that we have tried to back engineer some of that, and we've exceeded with some. But then again, if you want to advance scientifically, you cannot jump ahead. You can only advance to a little bit more than the scientific progress and knowledge that you already have. So, think of a caveman receiving a cell phone and trying to create that cell phone. It would never work. Maybe you could carve it out of stone, but certainly put it on the wall in a cave, but he could not reproduce it. So you have to be fairly close.
Nor could I. I mean, think about it. Yeah, it's a great analogy. Do you feel that anybody who feels they're being abducted or sees a UFO, I mean, is there anything you can say to people to encourage them to report? I mean, in other words, what good will it do is kind of the question I would think most people are asking themselves who either suspect they're being abducted or have seen numerous UFOs. What should they do?
Well, they can go to MUFON.com and they can scroll down to the Experiencer Resource Team and fill out the 30-question questionnaire. And when they do that, it will go to Dr. George Matich, who is the Assistant Director of the ERT, runs it on a day-to-day basis, and he will assign a team member, a specialist, to speak with them. If they have evidence and they want to make an investigation report and undergo questioning and the collection of physical evidence, they can do that. But the Experiencer Resource Team listens non-judgmentally. They're kind, caring people, and they're just there to help people and to obtain more knowledge about what is actually occurring. We're not the nuts and bolts evidence team, but we know that certain kinds of evidence is associated with contact and paranormal evidence as well. The two most prevalent are lighted orbs that seem to have intelligence that are seen inside people's homes, experiencers' homes, and also the sensation that something unseen is walking on the bed. Those are the two.
Very interesting. I mean, do you feel it's important, though, that people come forward? Or should they just... I mean, does it help?
It helps people who can talk confidentially to another person. And that's what I intend to do. People who come forward are generally very apprehensive about doing so. And when they do, they end up being attacked or criticized. And it causes pain. And what I did when I set up this team of 45 people that now, and 5 consultants, I did it for experiencers. I did it because I have a heart, and I didn't care about the physical evidence at that point. We have so much physical evidence, there's no question that this is occurring. But people need help, and that's what we try to do, to help them to come to understanding, because there's a lot of negative information out there. People who are thinking that these ETs are killing them and eating humans and all of these, just horrid things. And they're not. They're not doing that.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and we're starting to run out of time, is in your bio that I had read, not only are you part of MUFON, but you're also conducting like your own research and you're doing your own investigations. But there was something here about experimentation. What type of experiments are you trying to do, in these modern times?
Well, one of the experiments that I did with a team of researchers, including 2 skeptics and a psychotherapist and UFO investigators, was to communicate with extraterrestrials through a man who is credible. And he had contact for the first time when he was 8 years old in England. He's been living in the U.S. with his wife for 20 years. He was a police officer, and he's now a real estate agent. But he's been having ongoing communication for many years. And I met him for the first time in 2015. And for 2 years, we met with him one Saturday per month, and took our questions to this Council of Non-Humans. That's what they called themselves. We also took equipment to measure their presence, and what we discovered was that a laser thermometer went up significantly, about 4 degrees, when one of them was in the room. We also felt that strong tingling sensation through our bodies as they were communicating, and they showed us craft, and they would not show us their bodies because they said that it's difficult for them to just appear in our environment without using technology because they live in the 5th dimension. That's what they told us. So they taught us about consciousness. They taught us about why they're here. And we learned to communicate with one of them, ourselves, telepathically. So that was an interesting experiment. And they didn't communicate with the skeptics in the group, and the skeptics in the group didn't feel that tingling sensation. I should say the deniers, but everybody else who was in that research group could feel the tingling and was able to communicate.
Can you describe this tingling? I mean, are there more words that can describe?
Yes, it's kind of like a light electrical tingling sensation. I remember when I was a kid, I touched the electric fry pan and there was a short in it, and I got a mild electric shock.
Okay.
It's not painful, but it's like an electrical tingling sensation through the body.
Like a static charge.
Yeah, it feels good, actually. Yes.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
No, I know that you had mentioned like the consciousness and why they're here and stuff, but how many questions of yours did you actually get answered, and what exactly did you ask them?
Oh, wow.
A few examples.
Yeah, they answered all of our questions. I asked, for example, how they were able to pass through a solid surface into people's homes. And I had asked 3 theoretical physicists about that first, and I wanted to see if how their answer would compare. And they gave essentially the same answer. They said that it's a matter of vibration and a matter of aligning the vibrational frequency and the frequency and phase of the atoms. And atoms can interpenetrate when that occurs. And so, it's just a matter of frequency. Basically, we have a lower frequency, vibrational frequency, than they have. So we're denser than they are. But I know that when their beam comes down, people who go into that feel like they're coming apart. And so I think that the molecular structure is vibrating at such a rate that, I think of water turning into steam. It's sort of what happens to humans. And I'm wondering if that's the reason that experiencers have the same characteristics as near-death experiencers. I don't know for certain, but that was one of the theories that I came up with. I guess it's as good as any other one. But, experiencers become highly spiritual people. They become psychic or intuitive. They become empathic. They can sense what's going on in another person's body or their emotions. And I think if the ETs are doing that on purpose. It's brilliant because you cannot harm another human if you feel their pain. That would solve the problem that they have with us.
Interesting. If you could give one really good statement, Kathleen, to all the skeptics, what would you tell them to either search out, or what would be your argument to the skeptics?
Well, what I say to the skeptics is, if you want to remain skeptical, that's fine. I am doing scientific research the way that a scientist would, and I am looking for the answers. We already have the evidence. But the skeptics, for the most part, are not interested in looking at the evidence, or they don't have time to look at the evidence. And so, if they're happy that way, that's fine with me. I'm not trying to convince the world that this is real. Only the people who are interested in knowing.
Do you think people are skeptical because they're afraid?
I know that some are for that reason, because they've admitted it to me.
As you say, because that seems to be one of the core things, is that they don't want to believe. Mm-hmm. And so, I think even the people who say, I don't believe this, I'm a complete skeptic, believe it in some fashion. Mm-hmm. And because being a paranormal investigator myself, I've come across, skeptics who don't believe it and want to make fun of me for what I do. But the second I ask them to come with on an investigation, like, nope, I'm okay. Like they don't want to do it because they don't want their mind turned because of what that means for them. I mean, do you think that that's probably a pretty accurate kind of characteristic of skeptics?
I think that that's part of it. When you actually analyze the things that skeptics say, they create a hypothetical scenario, and then they inject doubt. If it happened this way, then this. With Betty and Barney's case, most people don't even know the real story. They don't know the truth about what happened, because Philip Klass, who was the most prolific anti-UFO disinformant of the 20th century, took every segment of Betty and Barney's case and rewrote it in a sense and told a different story concerning it. And even with Betty's and Barney's personalities, having Betty being a UFO kook who had long-term interest in the topic, and Barney being so weak that he would do or say anything that Betty said. That's absolutely false. Barney was a very brave man. There's an African-American historian who knew Barney, Valerie Cunningham, and she made the statement that he was brave and fearless. So that's the truth about Barney. And Betty was brave and fearless too. And rational.
So, what do you think right now? This will probably be one of the last questions that we get to, but what do you feel is the biggest disinformation that is out there right now concerning like UFOs and non-human entities?
Oh, that it's our own technology, and or technology from China or Russia, that somebody on this planet is that far advanced, and obviously it's a big lie, because if they were that advanced, then they would rule the world. We don't have that technology.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that answer. Absolutely amazing. Can you quickly, we've got 2 minutes left, can you tell us about your books, Kathleen, that you have for sale and that you've written? And they are amazing books.
Well, thank you. The new book is Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience 60th Anniversary Edition, with a couple of new chapters and new scientific evidence that we did not have when we wrote the first book. Extraterrestrial contact, what to do when you've been abducted, fact, fiction, and flying saucers, the history of government involvement in the investigation of UFOs and the cover-up, the alien abduction files, and the last one is Science Was Wrong.
Excellent. So and those are available, I'm assuming, on like Amazon and like Barnes & Noble and...
Yes, absolutely. If you want my autograph, they're for sale on my website at Kathleen-Marden.com. And I saw on the internet that even Walmart and Target are selling the new book, Captured, the 60th Anniversary Edition of Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience.
Nice. And through your website, is if somebody wanted to contact you, either they've had an experience or they have a question, your website's the best way of getting a hold of you?
Yes, that's the best way. I don't have a lot of time right now. I had to step down from my MUFON job because I don't have time. But the best thing for them to do is to get in touch with the Mutual UFO Network and fill out that questionnaire and speak to a person that I had trained.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Kathleen, for coming on. This has been an eye-opening 90 minutes. That's for sure. Because like I said, I had a general idea of what the story was, but there's a lot more that I missed, and not no more. So I really appreciate that. So that does it for Doug and I here tonight. Joel will be back next week with another great, episode of Untold Radio. So stay healthy, stay safe, wear a mask, get your vaccine, and we'll see you back here next week.
Has the world's most comfortable pants. Whoa, you must be thinking that's some big talk, but we know we can back it up. We've got 5 times the stretch of traditional denim and pants with zero compromise on style. Our performance fabric moves with you throughout the day, keeps you cool when the temps rise and warm when things get chilly. And did we mention how good they look? Once you try our pants, we know you'll agree. Use code DOER15 and get 15% off your first purchase. Check us out at shopduer.com or visit our stores in Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, and Denver. Doer, for all you do in a day.